works, we'll just leave it up there, right? So if you hit the X, is that what you're saying? Like if you hit the X, it automatically gets rid of it?
Everyone's goes away, right?
Oh,
So
okay.
don't hit
All right.
the X,
So
please.
don't hit that X.
It's an unfortunate side effect of having this much power.
With great power comes great responsibility. That's what my old Uncle Ben used to say, right?
Yes. Okay, we have a short agenda today, so I'm going to go ahead and put the link to that. It's a Google document that Fernando did for us. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in the chat. So if you'd like to follow along on the short agendas Google document, you can.
If only we had some piano music in the lobby.
We need music, yes. I don't think I am that technologically savvy though. So I think.
I don't. Yeah, in the cable to the headset, I don't think extends that far over there, or else I would have. If I had some requests, I would have been able to facilitate.
I mean, Elizabeth, would you mind saying something for us?
Hello. I can. Oh, singing. No, I don't sing. I thought you said say something. I was like, is my microphone not working? Hello.
No,
hello.
singing.
That's funny. I remember I went to a great session a couple of semesters ago, and I think it was Chef Mark, and he had some music playing in the background when we all joined.
Well, Star Trek music, yes.
Yes, it was Star Trek music. I loved it, and that was fantastic. But we'll just have to imagine it in our heads.
All right. Well, it's a little past 11. Do you just want to go ahead and get started, guys?
Yes, I'll put the content back up, and then let's see, share files. Okay. Perfect.
All right, everyone. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started with our session. Like you said, we don't have a terribly long agenda, but still want to be respectful of everybody's time. So let's go ahead and get rolling with this. First of all, you'll probably notice dominating the center of the screen is a very short question poll. If you would, take 2 seconds if you haven't done so yet already, and basically make your vote, make your response there if you would. But I do want to welcome you to our session. Our session is titled, as you know, Map Your Way to Course Alignment. We'll be talking about measurable course objectives and how to align your assessments and activities to those course objectives, making sure that they're appropriate for the students that you have. My name is Fernando Shiefelbein. I'm in the mathematics division here at Coastal Carolina Community College. And joined with me in this session is Miss Elisabeth Pitts over in the English division, and
Hello.
Dr. Jamie Schmidt over in the Humanities and Fine Arts division.
Hello.
All right. So if y'all are fine, I'm going to go ahead and close this poll right out. It looks like for our question, how comfortable are you with course objectives? It looks like we have a very nice majority of our respondents saying, I know what measurable objectives are, but I need a bit of help with them. And that is perfect. That's exactly where we all are. And sometimes that's kind of the way I feel as I'm coming into this as well. So let's go ahead and share through our ideas. As always, please feel welcome to put any comments or questions that you have in the chat, or just use the raise hand emoji, and we'll get started. All right, so we do want to start us off with a little bit of an activity, if you would. All right. So for our activity, what I would like for everybody to take 2 or 3 minutes to do is to choose or think about a class that you teach pretty often. If you're joining us as one of our newer instructors, I encourage you, choose a course that maybe you're scheduled to teach this fall semester. What we'd like you to do is we'd like you to locate your syllabus, all right? A lot of us probably already have our syllabus made, but if not, I'm sure your department has a SharePoint information. I know the math division does, that has some standard syllabi, or maybe they're emailed to you by a division chair. And on that syllabus, I would like for you to find the course objectives. Maybe they called them student learning objectives or student learning outcomes for the class itself. I want you to choose 1 or 2 of these course objectives to use during today's workshop. We're going to refer back to them often. All right? So if you would, take a few minutes, and maybe at about 11:10, we'll go ahead and get rolling. Yes, you can hide the poll now. Thank you, Dad. I just need to close the poll out altogether. All right.
It always takes me a moment to find my syllabus that I've created and my course objectives for the semester. To head over to Blackboard for the first time.
Yeah, fortunate for me, I was just working on my syllabus this morning, so that's already
Nice.
nice. Yeah.
That's nice. And if we do have any newer instructors or part-time instructors, if you need help finding this, let us know. You can put it in the chat, and we'll do our best to help you locate what you need. Fernando, you want to have them give us a thumbs up in the chat when they find it?
Sure, that sounds great.
Okay. I just love participating in the chat. I really do.
We won't call you a nerd on recording.
I love the chat.
Anyone?
Awesome. Okay.
All right, well, according to my reckoning, it is 11:10, so it looks like a majority of us have already got it as is. So let's go ahead and rock and roll forward, all right? So the first item on the agenda is talking about that age-old question, what exactly are measurable objectives? Well, first thing we need to do is really compare and contrast what a measurable versus a non-measurable objective actually is, all right? So Elisabeth was kind enough to, where'd the screen go?
It's okay. I think people don't realize that they can all get rid of the screen. I'll put it back.
Uh-oh.
It's okay.
So either way, as you'll see on the screen when Elisabeth pulls it back up, that the definition, at least the good old dictionary definition of a measurable objective, are specific statements expressing the desired qualities of key services and the expected results of these services and experience. All right. Well, to kind of put that in layman's terms, it's what we're expecting our students to get out of our class. All right. Typically, to make these measurable objectives, they need to contain some form of an action verb that you can physically assess your students on. So for example, we like to use the verbs create, calculate, maybe identify, all of these as examples of measurable action verbs. So these are things that we can physically observe our students do on a form of assessment. We can see them create something. We can see them calculate something, or they can show proficiency in that. They can identify things on a test. All right. Whereas for non-measurable action verbs, we'll look at things like understand and learn. These are definitely unmeasurable. We can't have somebody do an assessment and say that they understand it. That's not really exactly a measurable right or wrong thing. All right. We can't physically assess whether they learned it or not. We can see if they learned it by identifying and calculating and creating something. But idea is we need to keep it in that measurable sense. So to help us choose the best action verb for what we want our students to be able to demonstrate, I'm going to turn the tables over to Jamie Schmidt, and he's going to discuss Bloom's taxonomy with us. So Jamie, if you'd like to take over.
Okay, thank you. If you take a look at the screen, first off, remember that Elisabeth has at the top of the left screen there, the little magnifying glass. She has already mentioned that you can zoom in. So if you have a little bit of an issue seeing some of the terms on this, you can certainly zoom in and see that a little bit clearer. But Bloom's taxonomy is going to be one of the best resources for identifying terms that are most often used to describe and to provide students with, that's right, to provide students with measurable objectives that will help them understand, okay, this is what I'm going to be able to do at the end. So as you can see on the pyramid here, those are the types of things like create, evaluate, analyze, apply, understand, and remember, from the top down or from the bottom up, however you want to see that. Those are the types of things that are not quite measurable, but may be what you want your students to do. So off to the right in each one of the shaded boxes there, you can to the right of the pyramid, you will be able to see some of the terms that would be measurable that could support each one of the color-coded items on the pyramid itself. So as you can see at the bottom, remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, create. We'll be talking a little bit later about how those get more sophisticated as you move up that pyramid. Now also, this is not the only way that the Bloom's taxonomy is presented. You could see that some people put them in rows and columns. There's many different ways that you can view Bloom's taxonomy, and this is certainly not limited to the terms that you're seeing in each one of the color-coded boxes to the right. There are many more terms that could be used to apply to each one of the terms that is located on the pyramid itself. So when you look at the syllabus that you have been asked to find, do you find any of the terms on Bloom's taxonomy on your syllabus or on the syllabus that you have taken from SharePoint or elsewhere? And I'll give you a few moments just to take a look at that now. Or have you identified already maybe a couple that are not necessarily measurable? Are there a couple of terms on there, for instance, is the word apply in one of the objectives, or analyze, something that would be very, very difficult, if not impossible, to measure? That's what we're going to be taking a look at as we move along. And Elizabeth?
So what we have also is we have some examples of course objectives that we've collated from some of these courses. So Jamie today is going to be talking about his music appreciation course, and these are the course objectives that are defined for Music 110. So he's going to be particularly talking about course objective number 2. And then Math 152, Fernando is going to be talking about statistics. And his are called course learning objectives. So one thing to think about here is these might be called various things in your department, but right now we're speaking about the departmental guidelines. These are the ones that all students in all classes are supposed to be able to reach by the time they get to the end of your course. So these should be actually measurable if possible. And if they're not measurable, then that is something you might want to think about raising as a question with the people that make those decisions in your department. American history, Beth Fickling was kind enough to give us some of her information. So the course learning objectives, for example, CLO1, identify, explain, and discuss personalities, events, places, concepts, and themes of American history from beginning to 1865. And I'm working with English 111 writing and inquiry. In the English department, they're called course objectives. So I'll be talking about course objective, locate, evaluate, and incorporate relevant sources with proper documentation. Let's see. Jamie, did you want to mention about the course level student understanding with Bloom's technology at all?
Absolutely. Yeah, so when it comes to community college courses, most of the courses that will be taught at this level are going to be introductory courses, or courses that are not essentially high level with regards to the understanding of the concept. So the Bloom's taxonomy is going to help greatly in identifying what types of level of what type of level of understanding is expected from your particular course. So if you teach an introductory course, it is very unlikely that you will move beyond maybe the first few levels of Bloom's taxonomy, because they may not necessarily have the mastery of the subject to be able to perform some of the things that are at the top of the pyramid. So for instance, in my music appreciation course, it's usually non-music majors who are taking the course just to get a general idea of how music has progressed through history and be able to listen to certain things that on a very basic level they would be able to identify without having a huge knowledge about either the theory or the methods that are going on behind the scenes to make that music happen. So it's very unlikely in my music appreciation class that I would have them analyze any music like at that top green level or evaluate any performances because they may not necessarily have the mastery for that. So level of understanding is going to be very important in your assessment of what type of verbs you would want to use in your course objectives, or maybe even in your module and unit objectives, as we will see momentarily, to make sure that that aligns with the level that the student is at that particular time with the course. So you want probably introductory courses, it would be best to use verbs that would have them define or describe certain processes that are very simple. And once they maybe get a little bit more used to the course material or maybe mastered by the end of the semester, you might be able to go into the middle range of Bloom's taxonomy once they get a little bit more capable with that information. So they might be able to, as you can see from the apply, they might be able to demonstrate that they know something about music by either performing it or giving some sort of like interpretation of a performance or something like that. But they wouldn't be able to do that without some of the objectives having been satisfied from down below. So level of understanding is something that you might want to consider greatly when devising all of your objectives from the top down.
Yeah, absolutely. And this also depends on the course that you're teaching as well, right? So in the English department, we are asking them to create paragraphs, we're asking them to create essays, but after they have done some of the classifying and describing and explaining. So we do still move from the bottom to the top of Bloom's taxonomy, but it depends on which course that you're teaching, how far up they're able to go. What we'd like for everyone to do now is we'd like for you to think about moving from the course level objectives, which are the ones that your department defines for you, into module level objectives. So the way that we're going to do that today is we're going to ask you to find a major assignment or a capstone assignment in the course that you're working with today. So the course that you chose and you looked up the syllabus for, how do you know that your students have achieved something in the class, right? In most of our classes, we have some kind of a rubric for either a paper or a test or a presentation or a project, something that the students do to show that they have learned something, right? And sometimes the rubric is published and sometimes it's in our heads, but what we'd like for you to do is find that project, and we're going to use that project to build off of. So while you're looking for the project in your course that you want to work with, I'll describe one of mine. In writing an inquiry, one of the first essays that the students do is they inform their audience about a particular object, a concrete object, and they use research themes. And so what I've put on the screen is I've put some of the objectives that students have to master in order to get a good grade on this paper. So basically, I want them to have a reliable source, I want them to use a book, I want them to have a direct quote or paraphrase with a citation, and I want them to have an introduction, 3 body paragraphs, a conclusion, and a works cited page. And so I'm going to use that as a building block for today's workshop. Fernando, did you want to also talk about the project you do in statistics?
It would help if I unmuted myself. Okay. So yes, Elizabeth, I'd love to. As far as a major assignment is concerned, one of the most infamous assignments, and I use the right word there, in my statistics class is their term project, all right? Now, I love the term project where, as you can see that Elizabeth awesomely typed up, is that students have to design, conduct, and analyze a simple yet formal statistical study. Now this, and you can see the guideline, the bullet points that I require from my students in this project, which can be a lot for them. And this project meets a whole bunch of our course learning objectives, all right? But one that I want to make special note of, since I chose to work through this presentation with my CLO number 7, which is calculate confidence intervals for data sets regarding practical applications, I applied it in this project through the very last bullet point right there. They have data sets have data that they're collecting throughout the assignment. Obviously, it's an application of their choosing. And the last bullet point says that there has to be at least 2 methods of inference. In other words, confidence intervals or hypothesis tests outlined and performed. That meets my course learning objective number 7, where the students must calculate the confidence interval. Again, calculate is more of a lower end skill because even though they're designing the study, we don't expect them too terribly much to go high up into the level of interpreting the ramifications outside of what the confidence level tells us about how to estimate the parameter. So again, kind of staying true to the taxonomy that Jamie has outlined for us before.
Perfect. Thanks, Fernando. So since hopefully everyone has in mind a major assignment from the course that you're working with today, what we want to do is we want to actually help you to map some module objectives for those who are working on creating those for the first time. Because the project that you design in your course, whether it's a test or a paper or a presentation of some kind, the elements that students need to achieve or know to complete the project, those actually will become module level objectives. So if you take the pieces of the project, say the bullet points that Fernando was describing, or the bullet points in my writing an inquiry essay, if you create a students will be able to, and then put the objective there in the, create them there, that will help students to not only be understanding what it is they have to do well in your paper, but it will also help them to understand what they have to do to be successful in the course. And studies have shown that students who can see these module objectives are happier and more satisfied with the class because they can see their own progress, rather than having simply a project and then at the end of the course they're supposed to magically reach these course objectives. They can see that, for example, in Module 1, I will do these things. In Module 2, I will do something else. So what we're asking our participants today to do is to create or to share 1 or 2 of these module level objectives in the chat so that we can talk about them. And these are the ones that you believe will help students to create this project that you're working with. So we'll give everyone a couple of moments to think about those, draft them, and type them in. So Ed's put into the chat to develop a local government department budget in 3 different formats and describe the value of each. Ed, you have it listed as 1.5, and then you have CLO 4 at the bottom. Does that mean that this module objective will help students to reach course level objective number 4 in your class?
That's right. It goes to the course objective 4, and it's the 5th learning objective in module 1.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing. Do we have any other examples?
objectives that will cumulatively help students be able to reach that course level objective. The way my course is structured, this confidence intervals is towards the latter part of the semester. So you'll see my module learning objectives are labeled numbers 19 through 22. All right. But yeah, 19, we're identifying types of confidence intervals needed. So they have to be able to identify the type of confidence interval they need to estimate a certain parameter. For number 20, they need to compute and interpret the key components of the confidence intervals. All right, make sure they can do it from piece by piece. And 21 and 22 help with the practical application side of it. Determine a sample size based on targeted margin of error, which some of us may remember is from the confidence interval formula itself, and estimate the value of the parameter within a level of confidence, which is the main objective of confidence intervals.
Excellent. Thank you, Fernando. I like that because I think if I were a student in your course, I would understand that at the end of this module, these are the things that I have to be able to do, right? And then I would demonstrate that with the essay. We have a couple of examples in the chat. Anna Maria says that course level objective number 5, this is actually the one that I was working with for this exercise as well, the locate, evaluate, and incorporate. Her objective in her module is locate, document, and effectively incorporate source information in a research-based academic essay. I like that because it uses some of the same language from the course level objective, so I think that would be easy for students to see the connection there. Loy says that he has students recognize and apply the defenses to negligence claims. And Mark, students perform I'm not sure I know what that word is, analysis of DNA sequence data. Mark, do you want to tell us what students are doing there? He may not have his microphone working. Well, it looks very interesting, and I'm sure that if I were in his course that I would understand that. And then Warren is talking about a tooth contour drawing learning exercise. So Warren, is this is an activity that students do, or is this the object? Like, can you talk us through what the tooth contour drawing learning exercise is and how you would then measure if students were able to do that thing? Paragraphs, incorporating a reliable book source as a direct quote or paraphrase. Let's see, Becky Collins says, develop an online persona to engage students in collaborative activities like this. Will develop an understanding of advertisements and critically think about how companies attempt to reach their clients. And Beth Fickling has also shared her History 131. And so her module objectives for CLO1 are describe characteristics of early Native American civilizations, compare Native American, West African, and European cultures, and assess the impact of Columbian exchange even today. And what I think is great about her module objectives is the verbs that she's using are very specific. Describe, compare, assess. Those are things that she could actually measure to make sure that students have accomplished those. It would be difficult to measure something like understand characteristics of Native American civilizations, right? This one is better because it actually has her describing them. Beth, did you want to talk through your module objectives for this history course at all?
Well, so our course objectives are determined by the department, and the thing I learned by going through this process was that they really cover almost anything, and you could apply almost any learning objective to the course objective, which is good and bad, I guess. And so I have tried to be more intentional about my learning objectives and trying to match them to the course objectives. But sometimes I find that almost too easy, and I wonder if that is a problem, if that makes any sense. So what I've found to be helpful in terms of that is really for me just to think about the assignments and what I want the students to get, and then try to write the right learning objective, and the way our course learning objectives are designed, I think they're designed for anybody who wants to teach the class. They could be they're very broad. So it has the good and bad points to having these really broad course learning objectives.
That's true. I do think it gives instructors the ability to make it sort of personalized, right? Because the module objectives are the ones that we get to create. The department objectives are the ones that are handed to us, right, at the beginning of the semester, etc. So I like that you've explained it that way. I'm going to turn it over to Jamie to describe his Music 110 class.
Thank you, Elizabeth. We have one more from Brian too, down in the chat there. Understand how solvents are used in the refinish industry. Yeah. See, that would be one that might be difficult to measure. Would you agree, Elizabeth? Because you can't really measure how somebody understands without them physically doing something like describing or performing something on a test. Exactly. So,
yeah.
So Brian might want to reword just the beginning of that a little bit so that it is something that's measurable and the student would understand exactly what they might have to do, you know, to demonstrate that they do understand, because that's the goal. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Describe how solvents. Yeah. Something like that. Great. Okay. So in my music appreciation course, what we took was the course objective 2, which happens to be dealing with listening examples at the top, as you can see, that's highlighted there. And one of the things that students would be asked to do throughout the semester is to identify what makes certain musical styles different from others, and they would have, hopefully by that time, the terminology that would enable them to do so. And in the units down below, as you can see, I have 4 units in the course throughout the semester that we go through. The first one being songs, the second one being solo and chamber music, the third one being orchestral music, and then looking at opera and choral music throughout the history. And one of the reasons why I do that is because collectively from beginning to end, they get more and more complicated. So what we use or what we learn in Unit 1 with song is then applied to something a little bit more complicated in solo and chamber music, so on and so forth. So as you could see from the unit objectives, the UO 1.2, 2.2 under each unit, those unit objectives apply specifically to the tasks that they would be expected to perform in support of the overall course objectives. So notice that in response to also what Beth was just talking about, which is, I agree, it's both a good and a bad thing sometimes to have very general course objectives, but I just wanted to chime in and say that it's much better to have very general and workable course objectives so that there can be some freedom underneath at the unit and even on the individual class objectives that you have, where most of that creativity and freedom can take place. So I find that the more broad and general the course objectives are, the unit objectives are going to be easier to mold to those particular things, especially if they're departmental. So as you notice from each one of these units, all I did was kind of use the same language, but just change the topic. So for instance, identify elements of musical style or functional or function typical of the genre of song, and then solo chamber music, orchestral music, opera choral music. So it's just basically changing the language of each one of those particular objectives to match what would be supported up above at the course level. And that's kind of how that works. I find that was helpful in kind of tying everything together, and then at each one of the course objectives, like in each individual course, those would become even more specific with certain topics or music that we would listen to or terminology that would be applied in support of first the unit objectives and then at the top the course objective. So that's pretty much how that is set up there, using most of the same language. And I find that the students like the consistency of that language because it's not you know, it doesn't really move all over the place. Now, not every course is obviously going to have something that aligns like music appreciation does with a lot of the same types of things that we need them to do. But you might want to think about using language that's very specific, or not specific, sorry, coordinated, so that it's easier to link and align each one of these objectives from top to bottom. Okay.
I love that it is able, it's a beautiful course because you're able to have the same, for example, unit objective 1.2 is identify elements, unit objective 2.2, identify elements. I think that's wonderful. And I think if I were a student in your course, that would bring me a lot of comfort because I feel like once I had done it in unit 1, identify elements of fill in the blank, then when I saw it again in unit 2, identify elements of musical style, I would say to myself, oh, I've done that once before. I have a scaffold, I have a ladder that I can sort of go on to the next unit. So what we'd like everyone to do is if you would return to that departmental list of course objectives from your syllabus. So you may have that on another tab or perhaps you've got it on another screen. What we want you to do is the mapping part of this is where your module objectives should be designed now to help your students eventually reach one of the major goals within the course. And something that you also notice is that sometimes you will have one module objective that helps students reach multiple course objectives. And so that process of alerting students which module objectives go with which course objectives is the process called mapping. So if you would take just a couple of moments and think about do they help your students reach those course level objectives, and if so, how? And then also in the chat, if you would put for us, how will students find this information? Where are you going to put this info so that they're able to understand easily what they're doing in each module and then how they are reaching their success in the course level. So let's take 1 or 2 minutes and think about where you're putting these and how they are helping your students reach those major goals. It says he has a mapping documents in his course information folder, and then he refers to the MLOs and CLOs in each module folder and hasn't yet mapped assignments to MLOs. That is a lovely segue, Ed. I would like to thank you for segueing so nicely into activities and assessments. Before we move on to activities and assessments, does anyone else put these anywhere else in your course other than a Blackboard course information folder? Does anyone put them anywhere else?
Glad you have audio, Warren. And Warren tells us that students will find information through a rubric that he creates. Okay.
Oh, that's great.
Let's see. David says that I distribute and post in Blackboard module chapters objectives for each sections, but have not mapped them to the overall course objectives. That's fine.
And Will attaches them to the assignment sheet itself. I like that. So they can probably see them in 2 places, right? They can see them somewhere in Blackboard, and then they can also see them on the actual assignment sheet page. And Anna Maria has modules in Blackboard.
Excuse the interruption.
Excellent. And I apologize if you can hear this in our building. We are having a fire alarm. So if it gets loud for a moment, I may have to mute the microphone. But I'm going to turn this over now to Jamie to talk about activities and assessments. Again, thank you, Ed, for that lovely segue.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So at the top, you see the music appreciation course once again, with the course objective at the top, which is to identify the musical style and function with relevant listening examples. And in the first class meeting, we actually talk about two songs that they probably have heard, one being Nirvana, one of the popular grunge tunes, Smells Like Teen Spirit, and then from the 1960s, Jefferson Airplane's White Rabbit, for reasons that are really kind of contrasting in getting them to understand some of the terminology and hearing that terminology in practice in these songs. So basically, within the activity listening examples, those two songs, you can see that I put in quotes that it supports the module objective 1.2, which I know it's not up there, but the module objective 1.2 would be the specific concepts or things that they would be able to identify by the time they finish that particular class. And I think that on the next slide we'll see that. But those are going to directly, again, support UO 1.2 and CO2 up above. So the two listening examples would have elements that are a little bit more specific to that particular class, which would go right up the line in supporting the unit objective, where they would be able to identify those, some of the style characteristics or functions of songs through the listening examples, and then the overall course objective, which is to identify, using relevant listening examples, those style and functions as well. So that's kind of how that works with those, with the activity. And the assessment that they would have, I know that they aren't up here either, but there's a unit exam that would test them on those particular concepts. Even though it's not up there, I do have individual quizzes and map reviews each week that they're to do, where that would also be a task where they would have to kind of identify some of these things by listening. So even though they're not there, I think like I said, you'll see them on the next slide or the next couple of slides. But those are good examples of activities and one assessment where they would be asked to perform or demonstrate that they have mastery of that particular subject.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Jamie. One thing that I like to share that I use in my statistics course is going back to, again, good old trusty CL07, calculating confidence intervals. I can assess, oh gosh, my speaking just like dropped off the face of the earth. Anyway, I can assess module learning objective number 19, where I have them identify the type of confidence intervals needed for estimating a population parameter. So I go through this by a class activity, kind of like how Jamie had his listening examples. What I had them do is I go through a case study with them. So I, in my seated class, would read a case study as a class, and we go to good old Social Explorer. If any of our librarians are here, still use Social Explorer, to find the relevant set of data and extrapolate the needed statistics to estimate the parameter. And then we go through and walk through the steps on how to estimate that. Now, how can I take that activity and twist it into an assessment that they can actually do to show that they have met that competency? Well, I may have a lab question on one of their lab assignments that has students take a short case study that they have to read. And typically with these lab assignments, I provide the set of data. So that way there's some consistency among the students. And students must read the study and estimate the needed parameter that I prompt them to, using the appropriate confidence interval formula for that given scenario. If she's not running from a fire alarm, I think Elisabeth has the next one.
I do, thank you. I was just going to say, I love how both of your courses have a specific activity that teaches students how to do the thing that you're going to assess, right? And I think it's important, if we can, to make explicit to our students that this activity is helping us to support this particular assessment. So for the essay that they're writing in the module I've been working with, students are supposed to be able to create academic paragraphs incorporating a reliable source. So the activity they do is find a sentence from the library book, copy it on a note card, put the citation on the back, and then change it with a classmate and draft the paragraph. And then how do I assess, without assessing the entire essay, how do I assess this piece? What I have them do is submit a Blackboard journal entry, which is to submit that first body paragraph, which must then include the direct quote, the punctuation, and the in-text citation. And so that gives them another stair step and able to say, okay, I did well on this one body paragraph. Now when I incorporate it into a larger paper, I have the confidence, hopefully my students say they have the confidence to do that part well as well. Beth, did you want to talk through a little bit about your History 131 activities and assessment? And I should tell everyone, Beth did a fantastic job giving us a huge number of activities, so I had to shorten this to just one of her lovely activities. But if you're still here and you want to talk about this one, that would be great.
Sure, I can talk about this one, but when I look at it, it doesn't really match those objectives that well as some of the others. It's okay. So one of the this is part of an assignment that I had them do. And so what each question does is it sort of builds on the others. And then in the end, you're looking at characteristics of early Native American societies and how those Native American societies compare to European societies. And in the end, they're answering a series of questions. And so while this little question probably doesn't do the best example, we are looking at documents related to the Columbian Exchange and looking at Native American civilizations and how they view themselves.
Excellent. And again, I'm glad you were able to clarify that for us, Beth, because she gave us this wonderful, huge assignment that was fantastic, and so I had to shorten it a little bit for the purposes of this presentation. So since everyone has seen activities and assessments, what we're recommending that you do, if possible, is we're recommending that you try to make explicit to students what the activities and assessments, how they build in your course, so that they can understand how they reach those course objectives. So I'm going to turn it over to Jamie now to show us what a completed version of that might look like.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. So here is a good example of the complete course objectives, one set of unit objectives, and then what I teach in each individual class, which are the map objectives, or the mind maps that I use in my courses. And I think it's let me go through the course and unit objectives first, and then we can kind of flip back and forth between this slide and the next. But the three course objectives, as you can notice at the top in yellow, are very, very general. They don't necessarily specify any one era or type of music in specifically, because that's left to the unit objectives and then even further into the map objectives. The unit objectives are going to be from Unit 1 songs. You see that there's terminology. So for example, let me turn on my little, let me see if I can turn on my little pencil here, and I can direct you where I am. Like for instance, this one right here is where you learn about the terminology that describes some of the music and the function. Here is where the listening would take place. And then here would be a discussion on how works or songs of the composers that we talk about would be relevant to that particular composer or historical era. Now, in support of that, the map objectives for the first class, here is where each one of these would be much more specific, so that the student knows exactly what terms or concepts are going to be discussed in that particular class and how it would support the objectives up above. So as you can see over here, in a very specific way, we talk about style and function in song as with regards to form, that being strophic or through composed. So they might not necessarily know that looking at this, what is that? But they would know that they would be going over those things. With regards to musical things that they would be listening to, we would talk about dynamics and how tempo and contour of melody affects certain things. And of course, we would go over those types of things in the Nirvana and the Jefferson Airplane song. We would compare and contrast and see how those things function. And some of the compositional techniques, like for instance, the use of ostinato or variation technique, right? I mean, these are all very specific things that would then all apply all to the objectives that are on the previous page. Now, in support of all of those things, the assessments down here are basically designed, these two, like the review and the quizzes, are all each week. And that would fully support on the previous page, the unit exam that they would have at the end of the big unit. So if you flip back and forth between these two, you could see that there's, from the bottom up, it goes very, very specific concepts like all these things right here that support everything on the prior page, going to the unit objectives here, that is then assessed on the unit exam, and then it satisfies all these up here. So that's basically how in my course the students can expect each unit to go. They will have a regimented week where they kind of they do the map reviews and they do the map quizzes. They watch tutorial videos and maybe check out the chapter in the book, and that supports all the things that they do up above. So that's pretty much what the beginnings of a course map look like. And one of the reasons why a course map is so important is because it really does help both the student and the instructor keep track of what it is that they're doing in the course and what they can expect. And sometimes taking, even for the instructor, taking a little bit of a step away from their course and being able to see it all mapped out like that kind of lets you know like where you might want to tweak some things or what things you might be missing. Sometimes we get so into the nitty-gritty and the details of everything that's happening that we sometimes don't necessarily get a big picture look at what it is that we're doing, and sometimes you can see some glaring voids maybe where you think that you're actually going over it, but maybe not, So it's very important for both the student and the instructor to have a course map that outlines all of the things that are expected, and it acts as, in addition to the syllabus, it acts as sort of like a contract. It lets them know that they're assured that you're not going to spring anything on them that's unexpected, or and they really do appreciate that. And I've had many comments on the on the course that it was well organized, and that they always knew what they had to do each week, and it was easy to follow once they got used to the rather I would say unorthodox way that I present the materials through the mind maps. So that's pretty much what the beginnings of a course map look like. And I think that Fernando is going to provide some links to the full course map if you wanted to see that.
That's really fantastic, Jamie, and I want to thank you for sharing this with us. I know for my courses, it's definitely a work in progress. I have some module objectives, and I have activities that I know somehow match the module objectives, right? So my goal is to go through and take the module objectives and the assignments and make it more explicit so students understand this particular assignment helps you to reach this module objective, which helps you to reach this course objective. So that's the goal here. We have a couple of minutes left, and if you would like, you could take this time to write another module objective or two. If you want to put that in the chat, we'll be happy to talk about it with you. And if you have questions about it, do I think this is measurable? Do I think that it's not? While we're sort of concluding.
I would probably just add that to anybody who sees the stuff that we've presented in this this presentation here, that it is a lot of work, and it might not necessarily be something that can be accomplished in a semester. It might be something that over the course of a couple of semesters is implemented into your course, but over the course of many semesters, I mean, this was not something that happened immediately. It was actually Becky Collins, the Instructors Academy, the online academy, that kind of got me going on doing this, and then of course the Quality Matters certification throughout the entire fall semester of 2020. So it took, I would say, probably a good, I think Becky would probably say 6 to 8 months maybe to get this all together. So it is a long process, but it definitely is worth it. That's my 2 cents at the end.
Let me say something if I can, Elizabeth.
Absolutely, please.
Okay, this is Becky. Jamie is absolutely right. This is not something that you're going to master in a short period of time, certainly depending upon your starting point, where you are in this process. And thank you, Jamie, for mentioning the Academy for Online Instructors. We are this fall going to be offering a session, so I'm going to put a little plug in for that. For those of you who may be more at the beginning stages of this whole idea of course alignment and course maps, I'm really excited too, because We also are going to be creating and implementing sort of an advanced academy for those who are a little farther along with the process and really want to delve into quality matters. And I'll just say to all of those of you listening that these presenters, these three presenters today, are going to be involved in that advanced academy. Yay! Thank you. I'm just putting my plug in to have you check with your division chairs if you're interested in any of these trainings, or you can certainly check with me. Thanks, Elisabeth, Fernando, Jamie. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Well, guys, I think we're about out of time. As always, if you have any questions, you know all three of us work here, so please feel welcome to come hit us up whenever you want to chat about anything. All three of us are more than welcome to share anything that we have created for our courses. Jamie's course is QM certified, so he did an amazing work on that, and I think that is a great standard to look at. I'm not 100% sure about Elisabeth. I think you're working towards
working on it.
Yes, and I'm working on it as well too. So if you want to bounce any ideas or have me or Elisabeth talk about our experiences going through it right now, we'll be more than happy to share. But other than that, Elisabeth posted in the chat the link to our LibGuide discussion board and reflections. We do encourage you to go through that and maybe post some of the things you like, maybe start a dialogue there. I'll be more than happy to check it once in a while and chime in as well. But other than that, guys, enjoy the rest of your fall semester. It's been great having a chance to chat with you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great semester.
Yep, have a great one, guys.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.
Sounds good.